The first thing I noticed wasn't the champagne. It was the perfume. A sweet, expensive scent drifted through the lobby of the newly built Glass Horizon Hotel, mixing with fresh flowers and polished marble. The entire place sparkled under crystal chandeliers while reporters adjusted their cameras, investors laughed over cocktails, and a string quartet played softly near the grand staircase. I wasn't supposed to be there. At least, according to my husband. 3 hours earlier, Ethan had stood in our bedroom wearing his custom navy tuxedo while checking his reflection for the 5th time. "You don't have to come tonight." He didn't even look at me when he said it. I smiled anyway. "I thought we agreed we'd celebrate together." He sighed dramatically. "Claire, this isn't some neighborhood barbecue. I know. There are investors. Politicians. Media. I know. You'll just feel uncomfortable." Those words landed harder than they should have. Because 5 years earlier, there hadn't been a single brick standing where that luxury hotel now stood. Back then, Ethan had been drowning in debt. Banks laughed at him. Friends disappeared. His own family told him to give up. I was the only person who stayed. I worked double shifts as an accountant. Sold my grandmother's jewelry. Cashed out the savings I'd built since college. Even refinanced the little townhouse my late parents had left me. Every dollar went into Ethan's dream. Every single dollar. But success changes people. Slowly. Quietly. Dangerously. The first thing that changed wasn't his attitude. It was his schedule. Business dinners became business weekends. Weekend meetings became overnight conferences. Then came the expensive watches. Luxury suits. Private drivers. VIP parties. Every success pulled him one step farther away from the man I'd married. At first, I blamed stress. Then pressure. Then responsibility. Until I stopped making excuses. The distance wasn't accidental. It was intentional. A week before the grand opening, I accidentally discovered why. His phone buzzed while he was showering. Normally, I never touched it. But the message preview lit up across the screen. "Can't wait to walk into the hotel beside you tonight. Everyone already thinks we're the perfect couple." My stomach tightened. The sender's name was Vanessa. His marketing director. 28. Perfect smile. Perfect hair. Perfect social media image. I'd met her twice. She'd hugged me both times. Now I understood why. I didn't confront Ethan. Not then. Instead, I watched. People always reveal themselves when they think nobody is paying attention. Over the next 7 days, everything became painfully obvious. Private lunches. Deleted messages. Late-night phone calls. Weekend strategy meetings. Even matching travel schedules. Every lie connected perfectly. By the time the grand opening arrived, I already knew my marriage was over. I just hadn't decided how it would end. That afternoon, Ethan came downstairs holding 2 invitation envelopes. He handed me one, then quietly slipped it back into his jacket. "I actually need the extra invitation." I frowned. "For who?" He avoided eye contact. "One of the investors." Another lie. I'd already seen Vanessa post a picture online. A designer emerald dress hanging beside a tuxedo with the caption, "Big night." No names. No location. She didn't need them. I looked at Ethan one last time. "So, you're taking someone else?" His face froze for barely a second. Then he laughed. "Claire, you're imagining things." "I hope I am." He grabbed his car keys. "I'll be home late." Then he kissed my forehead. The same forehead he'd kissed every morning for 9 years. The difference was, this time, I felt absolutely nothing. I watched his black Mercedes disappear down the street. Then I walked upstairs, opened my closet, and pulled out a garment bag that hadn't been touched in nearly 2 years. Inside hung a silver evening gown. Simple, elegant, timeless. The dress I'd originally planned to wear tonight. I slipped it on, curled my hair, applied natural makeup, then opened the small safe hidden behind framed family photos. Inside rested a thin blue folder. Property deeds, investment contracts, original partnership agreements, and one document very few people had ever seen. The ownership structure of Glass Horizon Development, LLC. Officially, Ethan was the public face. Unofficially, the largest shareholder wasn't Ethan. It was me. Years ago, when banks refused him another loan, my attorney insisted every dollar I invested be protected legally. If this business succeeds, he'd warned, never assume love is stronger than paperwork. At the time, I'd laughed. Tonight, those papers suddenly felt priceless. I placed the folder inside my handbag. Then my phone rang. The caller ID made me smile. Good evening, Ms. Bennett. It was Richard Lawson, chairman of the investment board, one of the most respected businessmen in New York. Are you still planning to attend? He asked. I wasn't sure if I should. There was silence. Then Richard chuckled. I sincerely hope you do. I wasn't exactly invited. You never needed an invitation. What do you mean? His voice became calm. The ceremony cannot begin until the principal owner arrives. I closed my eyes. So, he hadn't forgotten. Nobody on the board had. Only Ethan had chosen to ignore reality. Richard continued. And Claire. Yes, I believe tonight, everyone should finally know the truth. I slowly looked at my reflection in the mirror. For months, I'd wondered whether exposing Ethan would destroy me too. But standing there, I realized something. You can't lose someone who stopped choosing you long ago. I picked up my purse, walked toward the front door, locked the house behind me, and quietly whispered to myself, it's time. The city looked different at night. From the back seat of the town car, skyscrapers reflected thousands of lights across the river, each one reminding me of the nights Ethan and I used to dream together. Back then, we'd drive through Manhattan in his old pickup truck, pointing at buildings we'd never be able to afford. One evening, he squeezed my hand and smiled. One day, Claire, I'll build something people will remember. I had believed him. I just never imagined he would forget who helped him get there. The driver pulled up to the entrance of Glass Horizon Hotel. Camera flashes exploded across the sidewalk. Luxury cars lined the street. Women in designer gowns stepped onto the red carpet while reporters shouted questions at celebrities and investors. I stayed inside the car for another moment. Not because I was afraid. Because I wanted one last second to remember the woman I'd been before tonight. Then I stepped out. The valet opened the door. For a brief second, nobody recognized me. Then one photographer whispered something to another. A few heads turned. I walked toward the entrance with calm, steady steps. My heart wasn't racing anymore. It was strangely peaceful. Inside the ballroom, Ethan stood beneath an enormous crystal chandelier. His arm rested comfortably around Vanessa's waist. She wore the emerald dress I'd seen in her photo. She laughed at everything he said. To anyone watching, they looked like the perfect power couple. Several guests congratulated them. You two look amazing together. What a beautiful couple. Ethan never corrected them. Not once. Across the room, I watched him smile proudly while accepting compliments that belonged to another woman. 9 years of marriage. Erased in a single evening. Vanessa leaned closer and kissed his cheek. Applause broke out from a nearby group. Someone raised a champagne glass. To Ethan and the future. Everyone cheered. Everyone. Except me. I quietly walked toward the registration desk. The young woman checking invitations smiled politely. Good evening. Your invitation, please. I reached into my handbag. Instead of the invitation, I placed a black business card on the counter. Her smile disappeared. She looked at the name, then looked back at me, then at the card again. One moment, please. She picked up the phone behind the desk. Within seconds, the event manager hurried across the lobby. His expression changed the instant he saw me. Miss Bennett. He extended both hands respectfully. We're honored you came. The receptionist looked completely confused. So, she doesn't need an invitation? The manager almost laughed. No. He stepped aside. Please escort Ms. Bennett to the executive lounge. I shook my head. Not yet. I'd rather stay here for a while. Of course. He nodded immediately. If you need absolutely anything, I'll let you know. As he walked away, I noticed several guests whispering. Curiosity spread quickly. Nobody understood why the event manager had personally welcomed an unknown woman. Across the ballroom, Vanessa noticed me first. Her smile disappeared. She whispered something into Ethan's ear. He turned. The color drained from his face. For a second, neither of us moved. Then he forced a smile and walked over. Claire. He lowered his voice. What are you doing here? I came to celebrate. You weren't invited. I know. His jaw tightened. This isn't the place. No? He glanced around nervously. People were beginning to watch us. I thought we talked about this. We did. I asked you to stay home. You did. His frustration grew. Please don't make a scene. I smiled gently. I'm not the one making a scene. Vanessa approached, pretending to be friendly. Oh, Claire, she hugged me before I could react. I'm so happy you came. Her perfume matched the message I'd read on Ethan's phone. She stepped back with a perfect smile. You look beautiful. Thank you. I wasn't sure Ethan had invited you. He didn't. An awkward silence followed. Vanessa looked at Ethan. Ethan looked everywhere except at me. Finally, he cleared his throat. Claire, maybe you should head home. I'll explain everything later. Will you? Yes. When? He hesitated. Tonight. You've been saying later for months. His voice hardened. This isn't the time. I nodded. You're right. Then I looked directly at Vanessa. I hope you're enjoying the evening. She smiled confidently. It's unforgettable. I believe it will be. Before either of them could answer, another voice interrupted. There you are. Richard Lawson crossed the ballroom with two members of the investment board beside him. Conversation stopped almost instantly. Everyone knew Richard. He rarely attended public events personally. Yet tonight, he walked straight toward me. Not Ethan. Me. Richard smiled warmly. I'm relieved you made it. So am I. He gently kissed my cheek like an old family friend. Several reporters immediately pointed their cameras in our direction. Ethan looked completely confused. Mr. Lawson. Richard barely acknowledged him. Good evening, Ethan. Then his attention returned to me. I've been waiting all night. Vanessa's confident smile began to fade. Richard glanced toward the stage where the master of ceremonies adjusted his microphone. It's almost time. He offered me his arm. Shall we? I looked at Ethan. His eyes silently begged me to ask questions. To explain. To argue. Instead, I simply accepted Richard's arm. Together we walked across the ballroom. Hundreds of eyes followed us. Behind me I heard whispers spreading through the crowd. Who is she? Why is Richard Lawson with her? Is she another investor? I thought Ethan owned everything. Near the stage, the event coordinator hurried over. Mr. Lawson, we're ready whenever you are. Richard smiled. No. He looked directly at me. We begin when Ms. Bennett says we're ready. The coordinator immediately nodded. Of course. I noticed Ethan standing frozen near the center of the ballroom. For the first time that evening, he looked afraid. Not because he'd seen me, because he had finally realized there was something about this night he didn't understand at all. The ballroom fell into an uneasy silence. Crystal glasses stopped clinking. The string quartet lowered their instruments. Even the photographers seemed unsure where to point their cameras. Richard leaned toward me. Whenever you're ready. I nodded. Let's begin. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage with a confident smile. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight for the grand opening of the Glass Horizon Hotel. Applause echoed through the room. We're honored to welcome investors, business leaders, members of the press, and distinguished guests. Another round of applause followed. And now I'd like to invite the visionary behind this incredible project, Mr. Ethan Bennett. The crowd cheered as Ethan straightened his jacket and walked toward the stage. His confidence had returned. He smiled for the cameras. He adjusted the microphone. Thank you, everyone. This project has been my dream for many years. I looked down. My hands remained perfectly still. I've worked day and night to make this vision a reality. The audience nodded. I've sacrificed everything to stand here tonight. I heard Richard quietly exhale beside me. Ethan continued. Success isn't easy. It requires courage, determination, and the willingness to leave the past behind. His eyes briefly met mine. Then he looked away. I want to thank everyone who believed in me. He began naming investors, business partners, architects, consultants, designers, employees, even Vanessa. My incredible marketing director, Vanessa, whose dedication helped make tonight possible. The audience applauded warmly. Vanessa smiled proudly. Then Ethan finished. And finally, thank you all for believing in this dream. The room erupted into applause. He looked relieved. He thought it was over. It wasn't. The master of ceremonies returned. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. He paused as someone handed him a small envelope. His expression changed. Oh, he looked toward Richard. Richard simply nodded. The host cleared his throat. Ladies and gentlemen, there has been a slight adjustment to tonight's program. People exchanged curious looks. Before the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the investment board has requested that we recognize someone whose contribution has remained largely unknown. The ballroom grew quiet again. Ethan frowned. This wasn't part of the rehearsal. The host continued. Without this individual, there would be no Glass Horizon Hotel. Murmurs spread through the audience. I'd like to invite Ms. Claire Bennett to the stage. For a second. Nobody moved. Then hundreds of heads turned toward me. Ethan's smile disappeared. Vanessa blinked in disbelief. One reporter whispered loudly enough for others to hear. His wife. Another asked, why her? Richard gently smiled. Your stage. I walked forward. Every step echoed across the marble floor. No music played. No applause. Only silence. When I reached the stage, the host stepped aside. He handed me the microphone. I didn't speak immediately. Instead, I looked across the ballroom. I saw old friends, investors, employees, people who had celebrated Ethan all evening. Most of them had no idea who I was. I smiled softly. Good evening. My voice carried effortlessly through the ballroom. My name is Claire Bennett. I know many of you have never met me. And honestly, I understand why. I glanced toward Ethan. For the last few years, I've become very easy to overlook. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. I won't keep you long. I simply want to tell you a short story. When Ethan first dreamed about building this hotel, he didn't own an office. He didn't own land. He didn't even qualify for another business loan. The room became completely still. He had one laptop, one notebook, and one impossible dream. I smiled at the memory. We worked from our kitchen table. We couldn't afford employees. So I became his accountant, his receptionist, his bookkeeper, sometimes even his construction assistant. Soft laughter spread through the audience. But dreams cost money. And eventually, we ran out. I opened my handbag, removed the blue folder, and placed it on the podium. I sold family jewelry. I emptied my retirement account. I refinanced my parents' home. I invested every dollar I had. Across the room, several investors exchanged surprised looks. I slowly opened the folder. And, because my attorney insisted, I protected that investment. I removed a single document, held it high enough for the cameras. This is the original ownership agreement signed before the first foundation was ever poured. Flash after flash lit the ballroom. The photographers rushed closer. Ethan's face turned pale. Richard stepped beside me. Would you like me to explain it? I nodded. He accepted the document, adjusted his glasses, then addressed the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, this agreement has never been amended. It remains legally binding today. He looked directly at the crowd. According to this contract, the majority owner of Glass Horizon Development, he paused, is Ms. Claire Bennett. Silence. Absolute silence. Then, gasps erupted throughout the ballroom. Someone dropped a champagne glass. A reporter stood up so quickly that his chair fell backward. Vanessa stared at Ethan in complete shock. What? She whispered. What does he mean? Ethan couldn't answer. Because he already knew. He'd simply hoped. No one else ever would. The silence lasted only a few seconds. Then the ballroom exploded. What? Did he just say she owns the company? Is this real? Every reporter rushed toward the stage. Camera flashes fired nonstop. Vanessa looked at Ethan as if she had never seen him before. You told me you built this company. Ethan swallowed hard. I did. His voice lacked confidence. I built the business. Richard calmly adjusted the microphone. No one is questioning Mr. Bennett's work. But ownership and management are two very different things. He held up the agreement. This document was reviewed again by our legal team last week before tonight's ceremony. He turned another page. Ms. Claire Bennett owns 51% of Glass Horizon Development. More whispers filled the room. Mr. Ethan Bennett owns 29%. The remaining 20% belongs to our investment group. A television reporter immediately began speaking into her camera. This is an unexpected development at tonight's grand opening. Another journalist shouted toward Ethan. Mr. Bennett, were investors aware your wife was the majority owner? Ethan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Another question followed. Did you intentionally hide this information? Before he could answer, Claire stepped forward. I'll answer that. The room quieted again. I never asked anyone to hide my ownership. I simply never asked for recognition. She looked around the ballroom. When you're building a dream with someone you love, you don't keep score. I believed we were partners. I believed his success was our success. She smiled sadly. I never imagined I'd need legal documents to remind someone of that. The audience fell silent. Several women in the front row lowered their eyes. One older investor slowly nodded. Richard spoke again. Tonight's ceremony was originally planned to recognize both founders. He looked directly at Ethan. We repeatedly requested that Claire attend. A member of the board stepped forward. We even asked Mr. Bennett several times if his wife would be joining us. Another board member added. Each time he said she preferred to stay out of the spotlight. Claire quietly looked at Ethan. So, you told them I didn't want to come. He couldn't deny it. His silence answered everything. Vanessa slowly stepped away from him. You lied to me too. Ethan turned toward her. Vanessa, listen. You said your marriage was basically over. It is. No. She shook her head. You said your wife never supported your dreams. Claire looked down for a moment, then softly laughed. It wasn't an angry laugh. It was the sound someone makes when the truth becomes too obvious to ignore. Richard asked gently. Claire, would you like to continue with the ceremony? She looked toward the enormous ribbon stretched across the entrance to the hotel. Just hours earlier, she had imagined watching Ethan cut that ribbon with another woman beside him. Now, everything had changed. Claire picked up the microphone again. Before we continue, I'd like to thank every employee who helped build this place. She turned toward the staff standing along the ballroom walls. The housekeepers, the reception team, the kitchen staff, the engineers, the security officers, the construction crews. You built more than a hotel. You built opportunities for hundreds of families. The employees applauded. Some smiled proudly. Others wiped tears from their eyes. Claire continued. Buildings are made of steel and glass. But businesses, they're built on trust. She slowly looked toward Ethan. And once trust disappears, the foundation begins to crack. No one spoke. No one even moved. Then a woman in the audience suddenly stood up. She began clapping. Another person joined her. Then another. Within seconds, the entire ballroom was on its feet. The applause echoed through every corner of the hotel. Not for Ethan. For Claire. She wasn't smiling because she had embarrassed her husband. She wasn't enjoying his humiliation. She was finally receiving the respect she had quietly earned years ago. As the applause faded, Richard leaned closer. There is one more announcement. Claire looked surprised. There is. He smiled. I wanted it to be a surprise. He nodded toward the chairman of the investment committee. The elderly man walked onto the stage carrying another folder. He faced the audience. After reviewing the future expansion plans, our board reached a unanimous decision this afternoon. He looked directly at Claire. We would like to offer you the position of executive chairwoman of Glass Horizon Development. Gasps filled the room again. The company plans to build 3 additional luxury hotels over the next 5 years. We believe there is only one person qualified to lead that future. He extended the folder toward her. Ms. Claire Bennett, will you accept? Claire stared at the folder. She hadn't expected this. Tonight had been about closure, not a new beginning. She slowly accepted it. The audience erupted into applause once again. Across the ballroom, Ethan watched everything slip through his fingers. The applause, the respect, the future. For years he had believed success meant replacing the woman who stood beside him during his hardest days. Now he realized, the woman he had tried so hard to leave behind was the very reason he had ever reached the top. The applause lasted nearly a full minute. Claire stood at the center of the stage, still holding the folder in her hands. She looked around the ballroom. 9 years. 9 years of sacrifice. 9 years of believing that love meant standing behind someone. Tonight, she finally understood that standing behind the wrong person only keeps you from seeing your own worth. Richard smiled. So, what do you say? Claire took a slow breath. I accept. The crowd erupted again. Photographers rushed closer, shouting her name. Miss Bennett. Over here. One photo. How long have you owned the company? Were you planning this tonight? Claire simply smiled. I wasn't planning revenge. I was planning honesty. That single sentence spread through the ballroom faster than any rumor. Across the room, Ethan loosened his tie. He suddenly felt as though every pair of eyes was judging him. In reality, most people weren't angry. They were disappointed. There was a difference. One of the investors approached Ethan. He had worked with him for nearly 4 years. Why didn't you ever tell us? Ethan forced a weak smile. It never seemed important. The investor looked stunned. The majority owner of the company didn't seem important? Ethan had no answer. Another investor joined them. I remember asking about Claire during our first board meeting. You told us she hated business. Ethan looked at the floor. I simplified things. No, the investor replied calmly. You rewrote the truth. Meanwhile, Vanessa quietly picked up her purse. She walked toward Claire. Several reporters immediately turned their cameras. Everyone expected an argument. Instead, Vanessa stopped a few feet away. I'm sorry. Claire looked surprised. For what? I believed everything he told me. She looked down. He said your marriage existed only on paper. He said you never supported him. He said you only cared about money. Claire smiled sadly. The irony is, I gave away almost all my money because I cared about him. Vanessa's eyes filled with regret. I would have never. Claire gently interrupted. I know. There was no hatred in her voice. Only exhaustion. Vanessa nodded once. I hope someday you can forgive me. Claire answered honestly. I already have. Vanessa blinked. What? Holding on to anger only gives pain another place to live. Vanessa couldn't speak. She simply turned around and walked out of the ballroom alone. Ethan watched her leave. He called after her. Vanessa. She never looked back. For the first time that evening, he stood completely alone. A few minutes later, the ribbon-cutting ceremony finally began. Only this time, the arrangement had changed. Richard handed Claire the ceremonial scissors. We believe the rightful owner should do the honors. She accepted them. Richard stood beside her. The members of the investment board joined them. Then Richard quietly asked, Would you like Ethan to stand with us? Claire looked toward her husband. He was still standing near the stage. Alone. Embarrassed. Broken. She thought carefully before answering. Yes. Richard looked surprised. Are you sure? Very. He signaled to Ethan. After a moment of hesitation, Ethan slowly walked forward. Every step felt heavier than the last. When he reached the stage, he avoided looking at Claire. She spoke softly. You should be here. He looked confused. After everything? You worked hard. You helped build this place. I'm not going to erase your contribution the way you tried to erase mine. Those words hit harder than any public accusation could have. For the first time that night, tears formed in Ethan's eyes. I'm sorry. Claire didn't answer. Not because she hadn't heard him. because some apologies arrived too late. Richard counted down. 3, 2, 1. Claire cut the ribbon. The audience cheered. Confetti filled the air. Music began playing once again. Glass Horizon Hotel was officially open. Yet everyone knew. The real story wasn't about a building. It was about a woman who had quietly carried someone else's dream. Until she finally remembered she deserved dreams of her own. As guests entered the hotel, reporters surrounded Claire. One young journalist asked the question everyone wanted answered. Miss Bennett, after tonight, what happens to your marriage? The ballroom grew quiet again. Even Ethan stopped walking. Claire looked at the reporter, then at Ethan. Finally, she answered. Success doesn't destroy relationships. It reveals them. She paused. I lost my husband long before tonight. The only difference is that tonight everyone else finally saw it too. No one asked another question, because there was nothing left to say. The celebration continued late into the evening. Guests explored the hotel. The orchestra played louder now. Champagne glasses clinked. Reporters chased interviews through the marble lobby. But Claire slipped away from the crowd. She walked onto the rooftop terrace overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The cool night air felt different. Lighter. For the first time in years. She wasn't carrying someone else's future on her shoulders. A familiar voice interrupted the silence. I figured I'd find you here. It was Richard. He handed her a glass of sparkling water. I remember you standing here during construction. Claire smiled. There wasn't even a roof back then. Richard laughed. There wasn't much of anything. They stood quietly for a moment. Then Richard became serious. The board has known for months. Claire looked at him. Known what? That Ethan was making decisions without telling you. She frowned. You knew. We suspected. He sighed. But legally, he never crossed the line. What changed? Richard looked toward the ballroom below. Tonight, he introduced someone else as the woman behind his success. Richard shook his head. We couldn't ignore that. Claire nodded slowly. I appreciate what the board did. Richard smiled. You earned it. No. Claire corrected him gently. I protected it. They both laughed softly. After Richard returned downstairs, Claire remained alone. She looked across the city. Years ago, this skyline represented impossible dreams. Tonight, it represented endless possibilities. Her phone vibrated. A message from her younger sister. I just saw the news. I'm proud of you. Claire smiled. Another message arrived. This one from an old construction foreman. You always treated every worker with respect. Congratulations, boss. Then another. And another. Former employees. Old friends, people she hadn't spoken to in years. None of them mentioned the scandal. They congratulated her for finally being seen. Almost an hour later, Claire returned inside. The ballroom had become quieter. Most of the reporters had left. The remaining guests enjoyed dessert and live music. Near the entrance, Ethan stood alone, staring at the city through the glass wall. He looked older than he had that morning. Success had always made him appear confident. Failure made him look honest. He noticed Claire approaching. I was hoping you'd give me 5 minutes. She nodded. You have 5. For a while, neither of them spoke. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I don't expect forgiveness. Claire remained quiet. I don't even expect another chance. His voice cracked. I just need you to know something. She waited. I loved you. Claire looked at him carefully. I believe you. His eyes filled with hope. But, she continued softly. The man who loved me disappeared long before tonight. The man standing here made choices that stranger would never have made. Ethan lowered his head. I kept telling myself success would make everything better. It usually magnifies what's already inside us. Claire replied. He nodded slowly. I thought people respected power. They do, Claire answered. But they admire character. And tonight, I realized I'd traded one for the other. Another long silence followed. Then Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. He removed a small velvet box. Claire immediately recognized it. Her grandmother's wedding ring. The one she'd sold years earlier to help finance his first project. I found it, he whispered. It took me months. I bought it back. He opened the box. I wanted to surprise you after the grand opening. Claire stared at the ring. The diamonds reflected the ballroom lights. Years ago, that ring represented sacrifice. Tonight, it represented regret. She gently closed the box. You should keep it. His face fell. It belongs to your family. It belonged. She corrected him. Now it's simply a reminder. She stepped back. I'm grateful you found it. But you can't buy back time. You can't buy back trust. And you certainly can't buy back love. A tear rolled down Ethan's face. Claire had imagined this moment many times. She thought seeing him cry would make her feel victorious. It didn't. It simply made her sad. Not because she still loved him. Because she remembered the man she once had. And realized he no longer existed. She gave him a gentle smile. I truly hope you become the person you used to be. Then she walked away. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Some chapters only end when you stop rereading them. As Claire stepped outside, the doorman opened the hotel doors. The city buzzed with life. Cars rushed by. People laughed on the sidewalks. The future waited somewhere beyond the lights. Her phone rang again. It was Richard. I almost forgot. What is it? The board meeting is Monday morning. She smiled. I'll be there. And Claire? Yes. Welcome home. She ended the call and looked back at the hotel one final time. Not with bitterness. Not with regret. But with gratitude. Because the building she'd helped create had given her something far greater than wealth. It had returned the one thing she'd almost lost. Herself.